Per usual, on this channel is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. It's Wednesday. Let's take a look at some altcoin charts, many of which have been popping off in a spectacular fashion over the past 2 weeks. Let's talk about liquidity a little bit. Let's talk about cycle relative to halving. Also, shout out to Maverick and Queen Satoshi, the first 2 members of the Atmosphere Aficionado Club. If you're interested in joining us, next to the subscribe button, we also have 31K subs again on this channel. Good to see that. Hello to the new subscribers. So if we look at the total 2, which is market cap minus BTC of the entirety of the crypto ecosystem, the value itself is kind of irrelevant because you'll have coins throughout the years that'll come and go, or new coins, Celestia, right? Junk that nobody cares about and is just clearly just pumping to infinity. But when we zoom way out, we get a good sense of when alts do best. Alts do best post Bitcoin halvings, the Bitcoin halvings in the red vertical lines here. So it is a bit unusual for alts to be doing as well as they are relative to halving, which is around 6 months from now. I think some of it is global liquidity conditions. Some of it is ETF excitement. Some of it is rotation from Bitcoin. Some of it is down the worst, up the most type stuff, specifically Solana, right? So I think there's a lot of things you could point to. I don't think you can point to retail volumes, retail involvement here. Across the board, there just really isn't that much volume yet, which is either super bearish or it says we're super early, you could read that as a bearish divergence in a sense, or you could say the blow off top euphoria volumes haven't even started yet. It certainly doesn't feel like anybody's here based on the social metrics. So I'm trying to gauge my own excitement about prices relative to the amount of people trading this stuff. I don't know if everything is just illiquid, and that's why we're going up 20% on a day for really no reason on some of these coins, or are we back? I guess we're back. This is Dominance, which continues to hold 52%. Again, you'd think Dominance is cratering here because of everything else that's just like zooming past Bitcoin, but Dominance is holding strong. I still think allocation-wise, for me, definitely, smarter to be heavily allocated into Bitcoin pre-ETF announcement, which may come by the end of the week, probably comes by the end of the year, and then we'll see what happens. It would be interesting if on that day, something like Solana is still up more than Bitcoin, which is perfectly possible based on liquidity. I don't know, right? Like I could be totally wrong. Maybe alts still outperform. I don't know, but for me, it feels like Bitcoin is still a place to be, unless you're dancing in between the raindrops here in the altcoin land on some of these layer ones. For the alt BTC index, also still getting denied where you'd expect it to be denied at this diagonal trend line. Now, at some point, this may break logically, right? Maybe this will morph into some sort of inverted head and shoulders, and post-halving, we get an even crazier quote-unquote alt season where dominance drops to sub 50 again or something, and the alt BTC index, let's call it, returns to a 1. So the entirety of the altcoin ecosystem is equivalent to Bitcoin's market cap. If this, then that. But if I'm trying to paint a way in which we could do that, that would be one way. I have zero confidence that any of these alts can hold on to their highs. There's just no fundamentals. Again, nobody's here, nobody's using this stuff relative to these prices. So for me, this is all just the market trying to price in kind of forward excitement and activity, as well as liquidity, which again, Tether, the moment Tether started breaking all-time highs in circulating supply was the moment we blasted off on the altcoin market cap chart we've been watching. And it's in pay attention season right now. Arguably, you've missed a massive move if you haven't been paying attention to alts, at least a little bit. But if this is correct, which I don't think it will be, but if this is correct, we're starting to enter, pay attention to alt season, which it certainly already feels like we're there. Preferably, this consolidates at around 300. And again, into April, post-April, has another run. That I think is my personal preference. I doubt that'll happen, but we'll see. And if we want to look at liquidity type stuff, if we want to look at the depths of the legacy market for the most degenerate type thing, ARK ETF, which I had thought wasn't going to actually pull up, has. So if you want to use this as a proxy for liquidity, retail involvement, money getting off the sidelines, I don't even know. But there is a lot of crypto in the ARK ETF. They've been trimming their GBTC positions, but they've got Coinbase as the number one holding. They've got Block, which is related to crypto, that's Square. But this other stuff, you know, is questionable. In any event, if this actually plays out, if these technicals play out, I mean, that would match having a crazy alt season, just ridiculous things, you know? And this would make the legacy bears even more angry. If you've been watching the macro videos, everybody and their mother is bearish, has been bearish all year, is still bearish, does not understand number go up mentality. Look, I get it. You can look at the fundamentals like I am with altcoins. I look at fundamentals, there's nothing there. People are saying the same thing with the tech stuff and with growth, but here we are, right? ARK back in the weekly cloud. So if legacy can start making moves like this, my argument is that the crypto stuff, it's going to be just off the charts, wild. And another sort of, maybe closer to NFTs than alts. I feel like watch people and NFT people were 1-1 during the last NFT bubble, but watches have continued to just decline. These are luxury. I think this is what Rolex, Patek Philippe, other stuff, if I'm even saying that correctly. But this tells me that, you know, retail is selling more than buying on discretionary things like this that are kind of crazy. All right, let's talk about Bitcoin. First, I do think you need to have some sort of opinion on Bitcoin here. It's in the weekly cloud. It's at the top of the pitchfork. It's at the yearly pivot. There's still a level between 42 and 47 where things could get wild on an ETF announcement. It's a US holiday next week, Thanksgiving, which is why many people are pointing to this week as a potential window for the SEC to come out and approve BlackRock's spot ETF. They've already denied or delayed a few ETFs this week. I think they were mostly delaying, but one of them was a ETH conversion, grayscale. The other one was some sort of index DeFi product. In any event, it still looks and feels bullish. I don't think you can be short here, obviously. Can it get super overextended and pull alts with it? Absolutely. So I'd be watching 42 to 47. And it's going to be interesting relative to legacy crypto equities when this announcement hits. If it hits beginning of the day, end of day. Anyway, this still looks incredibly bullish to me. Looks fine. Are we overbought? Sure. But we're also waiting and, you know, but it's more buy the rumor, sell the news type stuff. That's what it feels like to me. We even bounced on arguably an important diagonal. We were making a pretty angry looking inverted Adam and Eve, retraced to the exact level you'd expect it to. And now we're making, potentially closing at a new yearly high on the day. So this is an extremely strong bounce off of several days of selling. So we're just retracing all of that. And many of the alts doing much of the same. ETH not doing much of the same yet. I still think ETH does make a move to 3,100. Still bullish on the daily cloud. Not a lot of volume up here. As far as VPVR resistance, and not a lot of daily volume coming in just yet. Solana, Link, AVAX at this point have really stolen ETH's thunder. So you would think eventually ETH would get a rotation. I don't know if there's still a bear whale on Bitfinex who's selling this off. I don't know if there's a bear whale in DeFi. I don't know if people just think ETH is overpriced relative to this other stuff. All that's possible. But I do think eventually this will get a rotation. It's in the weekly cloud. It's above the yearly pivot. It looks good. It would surprise me if this does not break to 3K by the end of the year. That's how confident I am in this thing actually breaking up. And if we look at the ascending triangle from 2017, it kind of did the same. It took its sweet old time for months, broke out, and then held for almost a week and a half before going again. Now you could argue this was a bull flag, which is what I did at the time in my own trading. While I was trading through that, I said, look, this is still an ascending triangle. It's still bullish. The targets were much higher. So he does have a history of this. I think you just have to be patient if you are still looking for that trade. ETH-BTC still looks weak to me. Nothing new here, right? We can point to any ETF application we want, but at the end of the day, they're not going to improve an ETH ETF before a Bitcoin ETF. And the way ETH's moving at this point, yeah, we could see 0.37 if this starts to break down, just based on flows and based on the rest of crypto land really not caring about ETH at all. Solana has had one heck of a run. This is the fifth green week, really no pullbacks. Something else about these alts that makes me nervous, just like down the worst, up the most down the worst is also a thing. It was very surprising yesterday when Sol was still up 10% on the day when everything else was down 5% plus in crypto land. DXY got slaughtered yesterday, whatever the CPI day was. So nothing really made sense from the correlations perspective, and maybe that's why we're bouncing so hard today. But in any event, Sol still looks good, but it is at the yearly pivot, does have a potential target higher. Does it have a blow off here from 66 to 130? You know, does it have another 2x in it? Maybe at this point, the way it's moving. I don't know. It's harder for me to justify, unless you're completely left curve, where you're just like, you know what, I'm max leveraging my longs, longing my longs. It's harder for me to justify sitting in leverage trades up here, knowing that Solana's up 5 weeks in a row, right, on Solana, and that it's at resistance. So it would make the most sense for me for the stuff to pull back, but it doesn't look like it wants to. You know, it had a 3 drives, it has a bear div, it still has a bear div. And something else you could argue on all these alt charts is this is the div leg, where on the way up, we maybe didn't have divs on some of these charts, but on this next leg up, including Bitcoin, we will start to see a bear div. And just like you see here, just because you have one bear div doesn't mean we can't keep going higher. More of a probabilities game where eventually we reach a point where it just doesn't make sense anymore. Much like funding, much like open interest, at some point the trade gets too crowded. So if we see another high with another bear div, that gives me even more caution on something like that. Sol BTC breaking yearly pivots, breaking expected Adam and Eve move here. I would think this is overbought. I would think this would want to slow down. I don't know what's driving the Sol chart, so I can't even say like it's Asia or it's US or it's retail or it's institutions or it's ETPs in Europe. I don't even know. So it's really hard to nail that down, why this would stop. But again, it's hard for me to justify any long up here. On Solana, Link has pulled back a little bit, has held important levels on the USD chart. On the BTC chart, it's cooled off where it made sense to at that horizontal resistance. If this is a true Adam and Eve, this will probably lead to bullish continuation eventually. USD pair looks fine, looks like consolidation. Does not look like it's at imminent risk for retracement, and the weekly cloud levels at 30. I think if Solana starts to pull up, you know, it's going to drag everything else up with it in a very angry way. And I think that's the point where we start to see more profit taking, volume divs, RSI divs, and an even higher risk for a bigger retracement, you know, like a negative 30% day or something across the board. Of all the coins that have moved in altcoin land, I'd argue ADA has not moved as much. Again, for me, the fundamentals aren't there. I don't think this thing needs to exist at all, but it is traded. It is an altcoin. It was down a lot. It may have an issue here moving up because of market cap, which is something you do have to sort of pay attention to, even though this is 30 cents or whatever it is, right? At some point, the market caps just don't make sense. So things like Ripple, which I'm not even going to talk about, where the market cap just gets insane. It's harder to keep pushing that up. On the BTC pair for Cardano, still arguably bearish, but trying for a reversal, right? Doesn't look like strength to me here at the moment on the BTC pair. AVAX and many of these alt charts, I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago. I said, look, there's a W double bottom on almost all these charts. If you think this is your coin for the cycle, if you like the tech, whatever, right? Why would you have any targets in the near term at all? These things are all down 96, 99%. Set your stop loss at any lower low and just let it go. And stuff like this happens, right? If this is Hasaka pumping coins or whatever, I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me because again, I can't point to why this is happening. But the technicals are there. It's above the downtrend after the downtrend, right? It's above the resistance. It's above the cloud. I don't think this is a buy for me, but at some point you got to start to question, you know, if we, on a pullback, maybe to 16, maybe it is a buy. And it's funny, on the BTC pair, it did trade all the way down to that 2021 low, has bounced quite a bit from here. So, you know, this looks stronger than ADA to me. You kind of have to wonder, does Cardano have a champion in it? I don't know. DOGE also hasn't really moved, which is to me, a good thing. On the USD pair, it does have that Adam and Eve double bottom characteristic. This is where you see moves like we've seen when we've had consolidations like this. Absolutely zero volume here on Binance. DOGE BTC still looks weak to me. You know, previously when it broke out, it had a multi-month inverted head and shoulders. Here, not so much. Maybe falling wedge, but the USD pair does look pretty good. MATIC and Atom, which I'll talk about in a second, have kind of just held within these ranges. They don't look bearish. They don't look like they don't want to try for continuation. But again, you sort of have to pay attention to market cap, I think, here. There are multiple Adam and Eve type fractals down here, still below the weekly cloud. Ironically, anything above $1 in this thing might take off, where it hits that psychological resistance. On the BTC pair, it certainly has bounced to where it needed to on the low. And at this point, it may need to consolidate below the 3-day Kijun resistance there at 2,700 sats before moving potentially to the top of the range. Again, post-halving, I'm talking like a year from now, we may see a 2x on MATIC BTC. We may see MATIC to 10, right? I don't know. But in the moment, trend not as strong as some of these other layer 1 charts. Here's Atom. Again, had the W double bottom. It's retraced a bunch. Looks okay. It had that bullish bat fractal against the BTC pair. It was arguably at a range low. I think MATIC trades similar to Atom. So yeah, maybe we see Atom at 25 in 2025, right? If you're sitting in Atom that long, are you missing out on other stuff? Probably. So I think you got to pick your battles here with some of these alts, but it's had a strong bounce there off the bottom. Even DOT, which nobody asks me about, nobody talks about, I hear nothing about it project-wise, development-wise, has bounced quite a bit here from the low. I think the logical resistance would be a horizontal, probably around 7, but it does look like it's trying to turn the corner. And on the yearly pivot, you know, look, sometimes these are voodoo, and here's a great example. It went all the way down to the yearly pivot and bounced on the Satoshi against the BTC pair. This is a massive TK disequilibrium, as in this thing is very oversold. I don't expect this to outperform BTC. There's a lot of issuance here on the DOT side. From a technical perspective, it does have a decent argument for some mean reversion relative to BTC. And I think that probably comes after halving, if it comes at all. I don't think it comes anytime super soon. Celestia, I threw this one in here because I know people would ask about it. For stuff like this, it's hard to trade the technicals because there generally isn't a lot of volume, generally not a lot of liquidity. Sure, this is a bull trend. You know, it looks great. It hit an all-time high, went to 9 on Binance. There's really not much to say though, right? You know, I think you have to have some sort of buy and hold mentality with this stuff, but there really is not enough data, I would argue, to really make a strong argument for anything one way or the other. But it does look good in the moment. I don't think anybody's using it. I don't think it does anything, but it looks okay. Uni, which you'd think based on the popularity of the DEX, this coin would do amazing. Unfortunately, the coin is rather worthless. They have not turned on rewards for coin holders. They've not turned on revenue share. And until they do that, this coin should continue to get punished because it's the market voting with their feet and saying, look, if you're not going to give us a reason to buy this thing, we're not going to hold it. So good for the market. It'll rise with everything else, but it's not going to have a strong move unless they give you a reason to hold it, right? Against the BTC pair, it looks weak, bearish, kind of oversold. Still looks like nothing I want to touch at this point. AAVE, on the other hand, still above the 3-day cloud, still slightly below 100, still trying to break out of this diagonal resistance. Against BTC, it looks okay. Doesn't look amazing, doesn't look terrible. But if you expect lending and borrowing type activity to continue, I think things like AAVE and SNX, or if you expect, right, degenerate lending activities, or however you want to think about this and categorize it. I think of SNX as lending and borrowing, but then people get angry and they tell me, no, it's perps, it's trading. Okay. In any event, this SNX USD chart looks like it wants a breakout. It looks like it's ready to go, right? And it's got potentially a falling wedge on the BTC pair, which should have a bullish breakout attempt in it. Eventually, you could argue an ascending triangle here. You could argue inverted head and shoulders on this as well, but there's no bearish fractal you could really argue at the bottom here. So it does look pretty good. I noticed DYDX also started to break out. I kind of looked at GMX a little bit too, but as a group, as a basket, maybe you like exchange coins, maybe you like degenerate DeFi coins, maybe you like exposure to lending and borrowing, all that stuff. If this market continues to see activity, should start to do better than it has, right? It's gone from seeing tons of activity on the DeFi side to nothing. And maybe that's slowly starting to turn around against the BTC pair. Still looks very much like it's ranging to me. And lastly, I'll just mention some layer 2 stuff. Again, OP has had an Adam and Eve, is in the midst of an Adam and Eve breakout against the BTC pair, kind of similar double bottom type activity. So it looks okay. I'm just not confident that most of this stuff is going to have a strong BTC move. Once the ETF gets here, which won't be for another couple months, but at least in the interim pre-ETF announcement, I don't expect most of these alts to have a strong BTC move. I think between the announcement and the actual opening of the ETF, that's maybe when the alts have a best chance against BTC. And then after halving. Lastly, ARB also, again, a lot of these charts at a W double bottom. They've broken out. They look strong. With these layer 2 coins, you got to be careful with the airdrop stuff. There's just a lot of coins sloshing around. That's probably going to limit the upside potential a little bit. So that's all for this one. You can join me tomorrow at 2 p.m. EST for a live stream. And you can ask me anything you want. I'll take a look at a bunch more stuff. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.